Welcome to a world where the boundary between reality and nightmare grows faint. Before we descend together into the icy depths of a story crafted to keep you on the edge of your seat, I have a small request. If you enjoy tales that explore the darkest corners of the human soul, the breathless thrill of an unrelenting pursuit, and the intricate dance between good and evil, please consider subscribing. Your support helps bring more captivating stories like this to life. Now, prepare yourself. What you are about to read is a work of fiction, but it is inspired by very real fears that once shook an entire nation when an unnamed horror walked among us. Together, we will delve into a story that unsettled America, harrowing epic about a killer whose brutal acts left an unerasable scar on the soul of a city. The rain was a persistent whisper against the vast glass panels of the Seattle Public Library, a city's heartbeat muffled by the relentless Pacific Northwest downpour. Inside, Detective Elias Thorne, a man whose face bore the geography of too many sleepless nights, traced the lines of a grim photograph. Beside him, Detective Lena Hansen, sharper and younger, with an intensity that burned through her carefully composed demeanor, scrolled through forensic reports on her tablet. The air in the precinct's cramped incident room hummed with the stale coffee and unspoken dread that only a truly horrific crime could conjure. The victim was Sarah Jenkins, a vibrant, 28-year-old freelance graphic designer, found in her Capitol Hill apartment. But it wasn't just the fact of her murder that had sent a chill through the city. It was the chilling artistry of it. Sarah lay on her living room floor, not haphazardly, but posed. Her body was arranged in a tableau, surrounded by objects from her life. Paintbrushes meticulously fanned around her head like a grotesque halo, swatches of fabric draped over her limbs, and a half-finished canvas placed beside her, depicting a serene landscape that now seemed to mock the scene. Her eyes, wide and unseeing, stared up at the ceiling, reflecting nothing. There were no signs of forced entry, no struggle. A single, clean incision across her throat was the only visible wound, executed with surgical precision. "No, artistic isn't the word, Elias," Lena said, her voice tight, looking up from her screen. "It's theatrical, deliberate. He wanted us to see this." Thorne grunted, his gaze fixed on the photo. "He wants us to understand something. Or at least he thinks he does." Elias ran a hand through his thinning gray hair. "No signs of sexual assault. Valuables untouched. This isn't about robbery, Lena. This is about control. And a twisted message." The medical examiner's report confirmed Sarah had been sedated before death. A cocktail of tranquilizers, administered orally, left no visible marks. The killer was methodical, patient, and chillingly prepared. The absence of defensive wounds suggested Sarah hadn't even known what was happening until it was too late. The news broke like a thunderclap across Seattle. The Capitol Hill canvas quickly became a macabre headline, a disturbing deviation from the city's usual urban anxieties. Residents, accustomed to the tech boom's buzz and the city's laid-back ethos, suddenly found themselves looking over their shoulders. Fear, a cold, unwelcome guest, had settled in. 3 weeks later, the whispers turned to screams. Another victim, this time 35-year-old Professor Arthur Pendleton, an acclaimed literary critic at the University of Washington. His body was discovered in his secluded U-District home, echoing the same grim tableau. Pendleton, a man who had dedicated his life to dissecting narratives, was found slumped in his study, surrounded by his most cherished first editions. Pages from his own published works were carefully torn out and scattered like autumn leaves around him. His spectacles were perched on his nose, lending a final, eerie dignity to his lifeless form. Again, a single, precise cut to the throat. Again, no signs of struggle, no forced entry, only the chilling signature of a killer who saw his victims not as people, but as components in a morbid performance. The Shadow Weaver, a junior reporter, struggling for a memorable moniker, dubbed him. The name stuck. It was evocative, hinting at the unseen hands meticulously crafting terror in the city's shadows. "He's escalating," Lena stated, her voice taut, as they stood over Pendleton's body, the air thick with the scent of old books and death. The confidence, the precision. He's refining his method, or maybe he's just getting bolder. Thorne knelt, examining the scattered pages. He's telling a story, Lena. Each victim a chapter. Sarah was a creator, a visual artist. Pendleton, a critic, a dissector of stories. What's the link? What's the narrative he's weaving? The Seattle Police Department was overwhelmed. The public was in a panic. The mayor's office was breathing down Chief Miller's neck. A task force was formed, bringing in seasoned homicide detectives from across the region, but Thorne and Hansen remained at the core of the investigation. Their partnership a strained but effective blend of Thorne's intuitive, almost primal understanding of criminals and Hansen's sharp, analytical mind. They pored over the details. Both victims were highly educated, respected in their fields. Both lived alone. Both were found in their homes, places of personal expression. The tranquilizer used was a common sedative, making it difficult to trace. No witnesses, no fingerprints, no digital footprints. The Shadow Weaver was a ghost. He's clean, almost impossibly so, Hansen said, reviewing the meticulous crime scene photos back at the precinct. It's like he's rehearsed this 100 times. Or he's done it 100 times, and we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg, Thorne countered, rubbing his temples. But no, the MO is too specific. This isn't a seasoned killer with a long history. This is someone evolving, learning. Each scene is a step up from the last. They spent countless hours, days blurring into weeks, constructing a profile. The killer was likely intelligent, meticulously organized, and possessed a chilling degree of self-control. His choice of victims suggested a possible disdain for, or perhaps an obsession with, intellectual or creative pursuits. The artistic posing pointed to a disturbed aesthetic sensibility. He wasn't simply killing. He was making a statement, crafting a narrative of his own design. What if the clues aren't in what he leaves behind, but in what he doesn't? Hansen mused late one night, a half-eaten pizza cooling between them. No struggle, no forced entry. He gains access. He's charming, or he's known to them. Or he's just very, very good at slipping past defenses. The sedatives suggest he doesn't want to struggle, Thorne agreed, leaning back in his creaking chair. He wants control. He wants his canvas undisturbed. They began digging deeper into the victims' lives. Friends, family, colleagues, ex-lovers. Anyone who might have crossed paths with someone capable of such calculated brutality. The lists were endless, the connections tenuous. Sarah Jenkins had a wide social circle. Pendleton, more reclusive but equally well-regarded. No obvious links between the two. No shared acquaintances, no common haunts. The narrative, if there was one, remained tantalizingly out of reach. Then a lead. A small, almost imperceptible detail from Professor Pendleton's study. A single, faded bookmark. It was tucked into a rare first edition of Edgar Allan Poe's Tales of the Grotesque and Arabesque. The bookmark itself was unremarkable, a simple piece of cardstock. But Thorne, with his encyclopedic knowledge of esoterica gleaned from decades of chasing shadows, recognized the faint, watermarked symbol on it. The logo of an obscure, independent Seattle art gallery that had closed down almost a decade ago. The Obsidian Gallery. The Obsidian Gallery? Hansen frowned. It closed years ago, Elias. Bankrupt, I think. What's the significance? It specialized in experimental, often controversial art, Thorne explained, his eyes alight with a rare flicker of excitement. Pieces that challenged, provoked. Some called it disturbing. Sarah Jenkins, an artist, Pendleton, a critic. Both involved in the interpretation and creation of art, in a broad sense. Maybe the connection isn't direct acquaintance, but a shared world. A world that perhaps intersects with the Obsidian Gallery. The gallery was long gone, replaced by a trendy fusion restaurant. But the records, they would be somewhere. Thorne felt a spark of hope, a fragile flame against the encroaching darkness. They were finally moving beyond the horror of the crime scenes, beyond the fear, and towards the identity of the Weaver. The narrative was slowly starting to unfold, and they were finally turning the page. But the chilling truth was, the killer was still out there, meticulously planning his next chapter, and the clock was ticking. The rain continued to fall, washing the city, but never truly cleansing the fear. The Obsidian Gallery, though physically gone, remained a phantom presence in the investigation. Weeks turned into a relentless blur of chasing paper trails, digitally reconstructing old databases, and interviewing former patrons and employees. Thorne and Hansen delved into the gallery's tumultuous history, uncovering a vibrant but volatile ecosystem of artists, critics, and collectors who often clashed over the very nature of art itself. The gallery specialized in the fringe, the disturbing, the pieces that pushed boundaries, a perfect breeding ground, Thorne mused, for someone with a twisted sense of aesthetics. Their efforts finally yielded a list of artists who had exhibited at the gallery during its final, most controversial year. Among them was a name that caught Thorne's eye: Julian Vance. Vance was a conceptual artist known for his unsettling installations that explored themes of decay, societal manipulation, and the grotesque beauty of the human condition. His final exhibition at the Obsidian Gallery, titled Echoes of the Unseen, had been particularly contentious, drawing both fervent admirers and outraged critics. Pendleton, as it turned out, had written a scathing review of Vance's work, calling it derivative shock value masquerading as profundity. Sarah Jenkins, while never directly exhibiting there, had interned at the Obsidian Gallery during its penultimate year, drawn to its avant-garde ethos. She would have known Vance's work, perhaps even admired it. Julian Vance, Hansen repeated, tapping his name on her tablet. A grainy photo of a gaunt, intense-looking man with piercing eyes appearing on the screen. He fits the profile, Elias. Intelligent, artistic, perhaps a deeply wounded ego given Pendleton's review. And a connection to both victims, Thorne added, his mind already racing. Sarah as an intern, Pendleton as a critic. Vance saw them both as part of his narrative, his unseen echoes. They discovered Vance had largely disappeared from the art scene after the Obsidian Gallery closed. His last known address was a dilapidated warehouse studio in the industrial South Park district, a place notorious for its faded glory and forgotten dreams. A quick check revealed the building was still under Vance's name, though property taxes were years overdue. Before they could even plan a surveillance operation, the Shadow Weaver struck again, sending a fresh wave of terror through Seattle. This time, the victim was Dr. Evelyn Reed, a celebrated environmental scientist and activist, known for her passionate lectures and outspoken criticisms of corporate polluters. Her body was found in a small, forgotten nature preserve on the city's outskirts, a place she frequently visited for solitary reflection. The scene was, if possible, even more chilling than the previous two. Dr. Reed was carefully posed beneath a centuries-old fir tree, her body adorned with meticulously arranged leaves, twigs, and moss, almost as if she were returning to the earth. Her eyes were open, staring blankly at the canopy above, and on her chest, a single, perfectly preserved monarch butterfly had been placed. The surgical incision on her throat was, again, the only visible wound. No struggle, no forced entry to her home, where she was presumably taken from. The tranquilizer, the precision, the theatricality, the Shadow Weaver's signature was unmistakable. Environmental scientist? Hansen murmured, her voice laced with grim understanding, as they stood in the rain-soaked preserve. The police tape a stark yellow against the vibrant green. What's the connection to art? To Vance? Thorne knelt, carefully examining the butterfly. Reed dedicated her life to preserving nature. Vance's art, particularly Echoes of the Unseen, explored the degradation of nature through human interference. He often incorporated organic elements, decay, even taxidermy, into his work. This isn't just a victim, Lena. This is a statement about nature, about preservation, about the transient beauty of life and death. He's expanding his canvas. The media frenzy reached a fever pitch. Seattle was gripped by a collective fear. Schools canceled outdoor activities. Community events were postponed, and a palpable tension hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Calls for the killer's capture became a national outcry. The FBI, no longer content to simply monitor, dispatched Special Agent Marcus Clark, a shrewd, impeccably dressed man whose calm demeanor belied a steely resolve and a penchant for by-the-book procedures, creating an immediate, unspoken friction with Thorne's more unorthodox methods. Detective Thorne, Agent Hansen. Clark's voice was crisp, devoid of any warmth, as he joined them at the crime scene. My superiors are demanding results. This city is on edge. What's your lead? Thorne, never one for pleasantries, cut straight to the chase. Julian Vance, artist, exhibits at the Obsidian Gallery. Connection to our first two victims. His work aligns with the killer's MO. His final exhibition, Echoes of the Unseen, explored themes of decay and society's impact on nature. Dr. Reed fits right into that. Clark listened, impassive. A theoretical connection, then. No hard evidence. No DNA, no fingerprints from Vance at any scene. No witnesses placing him. You have a suspect based on artistic interpretation. We have a pattern, Hansen corrected, her voice firm. A highly specific one. And a unique artistic signature. Clark nodded slowly. All right, we'll look into Vance. But we need more than speculation to bring in a serial killer, detective. We need something concrete. Despite Clark's skepticism, Thorne's gut churned with certainty. Vance was their man. The profile, the connections, the artistic signature, it all coalesced. The team turned their full attention to Julian Vance. They secured old photographs of him, interviewed former neighbors, tracked his sparse financial records. He was a loner, often described as intense, brilliant, and socially awkward, prone to long periods of solitary work. His last known address, the warehouse studio in South Park, was now their primary target. A surveillance team was dispatched to the warehouse. For 2 agonizing days, nothing. The building appeared abandoned, windows boarded up, paint peeling. The rain continued its relentless descent. Then, a flicker of movement. Late on the second night, a single weak light illuminated a small window on the building's second floor. A shadowy figure moved within. He's there. The surveillance officer's voice crackled over the radio, laced with a mix of relief and tension. Possible sighting of Vance. Recommend a perimeter setup. Thorne felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it. The thread had finally unraveled, leading them to the Weaver. He ordered the team to hold, awaiting a warrant. But as the hours stretched, and the light remained, an uneasy feeling settled over him. The Shadow Weaver was meticulously careful, almost impossibly clean. Why would he be so careless now, with a light on, in a place they could easily find? It doesn't feel right, Thorne said to Hansen, pacing the incident room. He's too smart, too methodical. Why the light now? Why here? Maybe he's desperate, Elias, Hansen suggested. Maybe he knows we're close. Or he just finished another piece. The thought sent a fresh wave of dread through Thorne. Another victim? He ordered the surveillance team to proceed with extreme caution, to ensure the building was truly dormant before moving in. The warrant came through just before dawn. Under the gray, rain-soaked sky, a tactical team, led by Thorne and Hansen, with Clark observing from a safe distance, moved in. They breached the heavy, rusted metal door, flashlights cutting through the oppressive darkness and the dust-laden air. The warehouse was vast, echoing, filled with the ghosts of forgotten projects. Empty canvases leaned against walls, covered in tarps. Sculptures, half-formed and disturbing, lay under shrouds. The air was thick with the scent of old paint, dust, and something else. Something faintly metallic, something sweet and sickly. They found Julian Vance in a small, elevated studio space in the corner of the warehouse. He wasn't hiding. He was simply there, sitting quietly on a stool, bathed in the soft glow of a single lamp. Around him, bathed in the same artificial light, was his final, most elaborate tableau. It was a gallery of death. 3 figures were arranged with chilling precision. Not fresh victims, but macabre sculptures, crafted from taxidermied animals, human hair, and clothing disturbingly realistic effigies of Sarah Jenkins, Arthur Pendleton, and Evelyn Reed. Each figure was posed with grotesque, lifelike expressions, surrounded by the objects that had defined their lives, mirroring the crime scenes down to the smallest detail. The monarch butterfly on Evelyn Reed's effigy's chest shimmered under the light. And at the center of this horrific display, on a pedestal, was a fourth empty space, waiting. Vance looked up, his eyes meeting Thorne's. There was no fear, no surprise, only a profound, almost serene emptiness. "Welcome, detectives," he said, his voice soft, almost melodic. "You've come just in time for the grand unveiling. My magnum opus, the culmination of a life's work. My unseen echoes are finally complete." Thorne felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. The effigies were disturbingly perfect, crafted with a skill that spoke of long, meticulous hours. But they were effigies, and the killer was here, calm, collected. The sickening realization dawned on him. These aren't real," Hansen breathed, her face pale, stepping closer to examine the grotesque figures. Vance smiled, a slow, unsettling curve of his lips. "Oh, they are real, detective, in a way that truly matters. They are the echoes, the essence. They represent the truth that I, Julian Vance, sought to expose. But they are not the bodies." He gestured to the empty pedestal. That space, however, was reserved for the real art. The performance piece that truly captures the fleeting nature of life, the beauty of the final moment. The piece that needed living subjects. Thorne looked around, a horrifying suspicion forming. This was too elaborate, too perfect. Vance was not the Shadow Weaver. He was a disturbed artist, obsessed with the killer, perhaps even inspired by him. But he wasn't the one leaving bodies across the city. The metallic scent in the air, the sickly sweetness. It wasn't from the taxidermy. It was fresh. "Where is the fourth victim, Vance?" Thorne's voice was low, dangerous. "And where is the real Shadow Weaver?" Vance's smile widened, revealing a disturbing glint in his eye. "Oh, the Weaver. He's a true artist, isn't he? A connoisseur of the macabre, a master of the unseen. He understood my vision, you see. He appreciated my art. He appreciated me. And he was going to provide the final, living piece for my collection. We had an arrangement." Vance slowly raised a hand, pointing to a dark, shrouded corner of the studio. "He was supposed to be here, he promised. But he's late." Thorne followed Vance's gaze. There, in the shadows, stood a larger, tarp-covered form. A sudden, terrible certainty gripped him. This wasn't another effigy. This was real. The metallic scent in the air intensified, heavy and cloying. The Shadow Weaver hadn't been late. He had delivered. The empty pedestal was for Vance's next victim, but the shrouded form, that was his current one. And the sickening sweetness was a familiar, fresh scent of blood. The game had just taken a far more sinister turn. The tarp-covered form in the corner was indeed real. When the tactical team cautiously pulled back the heavy canvas, a gasp collectively escaped the detective's lips. It was Julian Vance's assistant, a young art student named Chloe Davison, meticulously posed and arranged with the same chilling precision as the previous victims. She lay on a bed of Vance's discarded paint tubes and brushes, her eyes wide, staring at the studio's high ceiling. A single vibrant red rose lay on her chest, a stark contrast to the pale stillness of her skin. The precise incision on her throat, the familiar tranquilizer the Shadow Weaver had delivered his final piece directly to Vance's studio, under their very noses, even as they watched the building. The horrific realization crashed over them. Julian Vance, the suspected Shadow Weaver, was merely a connoisseur, an obsessed admirer, unknowingly used as a stage for the real killer's grand finale. The light they had seen in the studio wasn't Vance finishing an effigy. It was the Shadow Weaver, meticulously setting his final scene, knowing full well the police were circling, relishing the audacity. Vance, in his deranged artistic obsession, had willingly become an accomplice, a pawn in a larger, more terrifying game. "He planned this," Thorne breathed, his voice raw, looking from Chloe's lifeless form to Vance, who was now weeping quietly, a childlike wail of despair and artistic frustration. "He used Vance's profile, his art, to misdirect us. He chose victims connected to Vance's world, knowing we'd find Vance. And then he made Vance a part of his own final, horrific masterpiece. Agent Clark, his face a mask of grim determination, moved to Vance. "Mr. Vance, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder and obstruction of justice. Everything you say can and will be used against you." Vance offered no resistance, only a bewildered, almost tragic gaze. He was going to show the world. He understood. He mumbled, his artistic delusion shattering under the weight of real death. The entire warehouse became an active crime scene, swarming with forensics. Chloe Davison's murder was undeniably the Shadow Weaver's. But how had he slipped in and out, past their surveillance, undetected? The single, weak light in the window became a chilling taunt. He had wanted them to see it. He had wanted them to know he was there. Hanson, her mind racing, pointed to a small, almost invisible access panel in the ceiling of Vance's studio. "Elias, look. Above the window, there's a narrow ledge, just enough to walk on, and a series of skylights. He could have come in through the roof. It's an old building." The surveillance team was focused on the ground level. Thorne looked up, a cold wave of admiration and fury washing over him. The Shadow Weaver wasn't just intelligent. He was a master of stealth, a ghost in the urban landscape. He had observed them, played them, used Vance as a deliberate decoy, and then slipped in through an unnoticed entry point, setting his final scene with audacious glee. The investigation now pivoted with renewed urgency, the pressure intensified by the killer's brazen final act. The FBI, under Agent Clark's command, poured resources into tracing any link, no matter how remote, between Chloe Davison and the previous victims, or even Vance's obscure connections. Vance, under intense interrogation, slowly started to provide fragmented, often delusional details. He spoke of an admirer, a patron who had contacted him months ago, fascinated by his work, particularly the echoes of the Unseen exhibition. This patron, who only ever communicated through encrypted messages and met in anonymous public spaces, had offered to fund Vance's next major project, a living exhibition that would push the boundaries of art and death. Vance, blinded by his own ambition and mental fragility, had agreed, believing he was collaborating with a visionary. He even provided a description, albeit vague, of the man. Tall, nondescript, with a quiet intensity, and always wearing a wide-brimmed hat, his face often obscured. "He told me he would acquire the subjects," Vance whispered, tears streaming down his face. "He said he would show the world what true art was, the impermanence of life, the beauty of finality." The vague description, combined with a meticulous re-examination of all crime scenes and surveillance footage from the surrounding areas, finally yielded a breakthrough. A blurry, distant figure in a wide-brimmed hat, walking away from the Capitol Hill apartment after Sarah Jenkins' murder, captured by a low-resolution security camera from a neighboring building. A similar figure near Professor Pendleton's home. And, chillingly, a momentary glimpse of a man in a wide-brimmed hat, obscured by an umbrella, entering the nature preserve shortly before Dr. Reed's body was found. The images were too indistinct for facial recognition, but the consistent appearance, the almost theatrical costume, pointed to a single, elusive figure. "The wide-brimmed hat," Hanson said, reviewing the enhanced images. "It's a deliberate disguise. He's hiding his identity in plain sight, projecting an image, a persona." Thorne's mind connected the dots. Vance had described his patron with a wide-brimmed hat. The killer was actively communicating with Vance, fostering his delusions, setting him up as the fall guy. "He's an artist, Lena," Thorne mused, staring at the blurry image. "Not just in how he stages his scenes, but in how he presents himself. He's crafting an identity, a shadow, literally. He's the ultimate performer." They widened their net to include individuals with backgrounds in both art and security, or even theater production, anyone who possessed the meticulous planning, the artistic sensibility, and the means to evade detection so flawlessly. They cross-referenced every person who had exhibited, reviewed, or even just attended Vance's controversial Echoes of the Unseen exhibition, looking for individuals who had a strong, possibly unhinged, connection to its themes. The list was long, but one name stood out: Arthur Finch. Finch was an enigmatic figure, a reclusive art collector and former stage designer for avant-garde theater productions. He had been a vocal admirer of Vance's early work, often defending its controversial nature in online forums. Finch was known for his vast, almost obsessively curated collection of disturbing and macabre art. More importantly, Finch owned a series of industrial properties across Seattle, including several derelict warehouses, one of which was only blocks away from Vance's studio and, critically, shared the same labyrinthine network of rooftops and alleyways. Thorne felt a jolt of recognition. Finch. He remembered reading an old article about Finch's collection, how he often purchased pieces that others deemed too dark, too unsettling. He also remembered a brief mention of Finch's past as a stage designer, known for his elaborate, often unsettling sets. A discreet background check revealed Finch had also recently acquired a specialized, high-grade sedative from an online chemical supplier, legally, for art restoration purposes. The type of tranquilizer matched what was found in the victim's systems. "That's him," Thorne said, slamming his fist on the table. The wide-brimmed hat, the artistic background, the reclusive nature, the properties, the sedative. It all fits. He's been collecting his victims like art pieces, and Vance was just another part of his collection, his final grand exhibit. Armed with a new warrant and a surge of renewed purpose, Thorne, Hansen, and Agent Clark led a full tactical team to Arthur Finch's primary residence, a secluded, heavily fortified estate nestled amidst the old money enclaves of Seattle's northern suburbs. The house itself was a sprawling, imposing structure, almost museum-like, surrounded by high walls and security cameras. They breached the gates, moving swiftly and silently through the manicured grounds. The house was unnervingly quiet. Inside, it was a mausoleum of macabre art, a testament to Finch's twisted aesthetic. Statues of tortured figures, paintings depicting scenes of despair, and unsettling taxidermy filled every room. They found Arthur Finch in his private gallery, a vast, dimly lit space in the heart of the estate. He wasn't surprised. He was standing before a large, empty pedestal, slowly rotating a wide-brimmed hat in his hands. He was a man in his late 50s, impeccably dressed, with calm, almost serene eyes that held an unnerving glint of intelligence and madness. "Detectives," Finch said, his voice smooth, almost aristocratic, devoid of any panic. "I've been expecting you. My final curator, I presume? You always arrive for the grand finale, don't you?" Thorne's gaze swept the room. The walls were adorned with photographs. Not just photos of Finch's art collection, but high-resolution, professional-grade photographs of Sarah Jenkins, Arthur Pendleton, Evelyn Reed, and Chloe Davison, each one captured in their death tableau, precisely as they were found. Below each photograph, meticulously framed, was a small, elegant plaque with a title: "The Weaver's Loom, The Critic's Silence, The Earth's Embrace, The Unseen Echo." Finch watched Thorne's face, a slight, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips. Julian Vance was a fascinating collaborator, but ultimately a mere instrument. He saw the form, not the profound truth behind the art. He understood the echoes, but not the silent weaver who pulled the threads. He paused, looking at the empty pedestal. "My greatest regret is that I couldn't include you, Detective Thorne. Your intensity, your relentless pursuit. You would have been a magnificent piece in my collection. Perhaps my masterpiece." Thorne felt a cold fury, but he kept his voice level. "It ends here, Finch. Your exhibit is closed." Finch chuckled softly, a sound that sent shivers down Hansen's spine. "Does it? Art, detective, is eternal. It lives on long after the artist is gone. My work, my message, it will resonate. It will make people question beauty, mortality, the very essence of human experience. I merely provided the canvas. The city of Seattle, the nation, they will never forget." As the tactical team moved in to arrest him, Arthur Finch, the Shadow Weaver, offered no resistance. He simply placed his wide-brimmed hat on the empty pedestal, a final, chilling statement. His eyes, devoid of fear, were fixed on Thorne. The capture of Arthur Finch brought a profound sense of relief to Seattle, but it did little to erase the lingering shadows. The city, and indeed the nation, grappled with the implications of a killer who viewed human life as mere material for his grotesque artistic vision. The story of the Shadow Weaver became a chilling cautionary tale, a dark stain on the city's vibrant tapestry. Detectives Thorne and Hansen, exhausted but resolute, continued their work, forever haunted by the chilling precision of Finch's art and the unsettling truth that beneath the veneer of civilization, the darkest forms of creativity could take root. The rain continued to fall over Seattle, but the fear, once a tempest, had settled into a quiet, pervasive unease, a constant reminder of the shadows that still lingered, unseen, waiting to weave their next tale. And as for the empty pedestal in Finch's gallery, it stood as a chilling monument, forever reminding them that true darkness often hides behind the most meticulously crafted facades.